Hi, I'm Captain Rick Riles from Florida Sportsman Magazine. This week, we are bringing you the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter podcast, and here's the reason why. We want you to catch more fish, so here's how we're going to do it. We have assembled 11 of the best captains in Florida to give us advice on their area and bring you up to date on what's happening now. Now, what that means is you're going to get advice about your area. Hopefully, we can not only spread the news about what's going on around the state, we can drill down and help you catch more fish on your next trip out. We're going to start it with a real dream stop in Nosara, Costa Rica, where I have to get my weekly fix from my buddy Craig Sutton teaching us about how the billfish bite is in Costa Rica. Then we're going to break down Florida. We're going to start up in the Northeast. We're going to find out where the mullet are, what the mullet run's like, what the redfish are doing. We'll work our way all the way down the East Coast, inshore and offshore, and then up the West Coast and out the Panhandle. It's all designed to help you become a better fisherman. Gosh, I hope we can help you tonight. Florida Sportsman is brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum, it's the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream billfish vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. It's time to get it rolling. Let's take a quick stop in Costa Rica and find out what's going on in Paradise. All right, it's time for us to give a stop to Nosara, Costa Rica. I can already tell you the temperature is 81 degrees, and it just feels fantastic. Craig, how are you?
I'm good, Captain Ricky.
Good.
I'm real good, buddy.
Why doesn't it feel as hot in Costa Rica as it does Jacksonville, Florida?
I think because we only get humidity certain times of the year. And we generally have a breeze, too.
I guess.
Whether it's offshore or onshore. But it's also, you're eating really good food and having fun and not working. So it's kind of the atmosphere is a little better.
Part of it's just being on vacation, isn't it?
That's right. Not having a schedule and, people, tapping on your shoulder all the time, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do know exactly what you mean.
Well, yep. I'm heading down there in the morning to spray some boats. We'll spray the Wonder and Discover.
Good.
And a bunch of other little things. Yeah. It's what we do.
Good. You'll be back running again by the end of October, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We'll have pretty much the harvester is almost ready to go back in the water. There's very little work on the harvester every year. That's about as maintenance-free a boat as ever been built. But the Wonder Discover, a little different issue. But, they'll be ready. We'll have the bulk of the work done hopefully by Saturday when I come home and things finish up, putting the the rub rails on them and, spraying the gel coat on the cockpit floors and that kind of stuff, It's, they're maintenance free, but there's still a little bit on them. And that painting the outside, it's been 4 years since we sprayed the outside of them. So it's time to do that.
All right, Craigie, I got one for you.
Okay.
You and I have witnessed a lot of innovation in our favorite sport. All right.
Ooh, we have. Yes, sir.
The top 5 things I could think of were braided line. I mean, that made everything from inshore casting better to us being able to put a whole lot more line on our marlin reels. Fluorocarbon, which made us much stealthier. Superior bait casters, you can now throw them a mile. The new drags on spinning reels and bait casters that, if you'll remember, we grew up bait casting with an Ambassador 5000, which you could throw about out of your shadow.
Or 6500.
Right, all of them, right.
Mm-hmm.
And these new ones are so much better. And the hooks that we have today, oh my gosh, they are nothing like the things that we used. We couldn't hurt ourselves with the old hooks. Now we certainly can. All right, you got to give up one. What would you give up?
Well, we definitely, for us, those light wire circle hooks that Eagle Claw makes are really not every day we fish, but the days when the bite is really tough, those light wire circle hooks will make a huge difference.
Yep.
The braid, we use more and more braid now, and I caught my first marlin back in April on braid. I was super impressed with it. And the bait casters, the spinners now, they've got, we've got those Saragosas where you can put 35 pounds of drag on them. That's something new.
Sure.
So I'd have to say fluorocarbon.
Yeah, we could live without
I had to give up one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain instances that for us that it's very critical, but we could also downsize and probably still catch the fish. But we've had days down there where we were using fluorocarbon on our lures inshore for yellowfin, and one of the local boats was right there next to us the whole time, and he caught one and we caught 12.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt it works. There's no doubt it works.
And I'm sure it's some other issues too, not just the fluorocarbon, but yeah, it definitely works. It really does. When we first started in Costa Rica, all the local captains but our guys said it's a myth. The fluorocarbon's a myth, until we rubbed rails with that one local boat that day and just absolutely embarrassed him. And, we were using light fluorocarbon on our spoons and our lures.
Yeah. Yep. You're absolutely right. But out of all those things that we mentioned, it's probably the one I'd give up before I gave up the others. I sure wouldn't give up the improvement in drags. It's just incredible. Now you got to look down at the reel to see whether the fish is running or not. I mean, it's a lot different than how we grew up.
And the drags now aren't as susceptible to heat like they used to be.
Right.
Your ceramic case reels still are a little apt to get case distortion, but we don't use any ceramic case reels in Costa Rica because of that issue. But the drags are so smooth now. I mean, golly. I can remember the old pins. You had that initial drag that it would take 35 pounds to get it going, where the drag would be set on 20 once it got going, and that was the kiss of death on a lot of fishing.
If you think about it, remember the old TLDs that we started kingfishing with, that if it started raining, we were all screwed because the drags couldn't get wet?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I still got I got a set of TLDs that are 15 years old, still work great.
Mm-hmm, no doubt.
But they don't get wet.
The first generation of them, you sure couldn't get them wet. Thank you, Craigie. We appreciate it. I know you're looking forward to getting back on the water down there.
Absolutely, Ricky, and thanks for the call, buddy.
We'll talk to you next week. Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. Time to hit Florida. Let's check in and find out what Captain Voorhees is up to.
Hey, Ricky.
Captain David, how are you?
Hey, buddy. Doing good.
All right. How's your fishing been this week?
Well, it's been really good. And, I talk about these tides. I know it's becoming monotonous, but we've got to talk about tides when it comes to Northeast Florida. And we're into a very interesting time where we get what we call these flood tides, these very high spring tides. And they're higher than normal this time of year. So the water actually floods into the marsh grasses, and the reds will actually go into these grassy areas, and they'll load up on crabs, fiddler crabs, mud crabs, stone crabs. They'll get any kind of crab that's up there. And for them, it's sort of easy pickings, especially the fiddler crabs, because fiddler crabs are land crabs. So they have to go out of the water. So they climb up on the stalks of grass, and it makes for easy picking when you have these flood tides, because those crabs got to get out of the water. So it's an interesting time for us. But, I want to talk about how I figure out what tide I like to fish. And that goes to looking at a good tide chart. And not all tide charts are created equal, Rick. Some of them just don't give you quite enough information. For me, the best one you're going to find is the one that is illustrated in the back of the Florida Sportsman magazine. And I like it because it's a graph. Now, the key word here is tide prediction.
Right.
People have to know when you see a tide chart, it is a prediction. It's just going to tell you what they think it should be. There's nothing cut in stone when it comes to tide because there's a lot of variables involved. But the one thing I like with the chart, and it gives you a couple of different things. It gives you that chart, and it gives you the high points and it gives you the low points. And there's two numbers. There's a number up there right above the time. So let's take, for example, a date on, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick one up. I'm going to say we'll go to September 18th, and we're going to look at this tide here. So at 7 in the morning, we have a high tide, which is going to be at 17 a.m. The tide is the number under that is a 5.1, which is a pretty high tide. And then we've got our low tide, which is going to happen at 1:04, and it's going to be a 0.5. So those two numbers, you take the difference between those two numbers, and it's going to give you what your movement is. Now, it's not a great one, but the next high tide, the 7:51, it has a number of 5.7. We've always said anything over a 5.3, you got a good chance of it flooding, So, so on that date, we got a 5.7, and it's happening around 8 o'clock. So it's possible to get out there and get on the grass late in the evening, which a lot of times is good. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that top number, and I'm looking for a number greater than 5.3. Now, let's take a 5.2, for example. Well, it's going to be borderline. However, if you get a west wind, then that could change everything. Stay home. Don't go because it's not going to flood. But if you get an east wind, let's say even a northeaster that's blowing pretty good, it's going to push more water in, and it could actually get a foot higher. It could actually go from, let's say, a 5.1 to a 6.1. It could actually get a foot higher than normal. So direction of wind will affect your tide very much. So you got to pay attention to that wind direction. So when you get go ahead.
If you get a strong enough northeaster, if you get a northeaster over 20 knots, you can probably put your tide guide away, can't you? Because this is going to flood.
Pretty much. Yep. Pretty much so. And, people, I've often tried to figure this out. This is one time of the year, and sometimes it'll start right about the end of August, and it'll go right about to the time it starts to get cold. Once that water temperature gets a certain temperature, those crabs will what we call bury down. These reds will no longer get up on the grass, and you won't see them tailing. But usually my two favorite months are going to be September and October for the flooded grass. And there's a lot to this. It's not, like I said, there's not a lot of, it's not cut and dry. There's a lot of give and take here, wind direction, what moon phase you're in. But you've got to almost get out there on a daily basis and look at those tides too. And that really helps when you're out there. And now there's a lot more people doing it on these flats. So you're also limited into where you're gonna flats you're gonna get onto, where you're gonna be able to get onto some that people haven't already walked through or walked over. Now we have the Spartina grass up here. This is what you see in the Carolinas, down into Georgia, all the way down into northeast Florida. And the Spartina grass will grow different on different conditions. And what we look for is this grass, and it's the same grass, but it grows very short. It almost looks like somebody's mowed the greens, whereas the surrounding grass is nice and tall. But if you look onto the grass flat, you'll see short grass. What that is hard ground. The roots in the Spartina grass aren't able to go down deep enough, and therefore the stalk of the grass doesn't get as tall as it does in soft, mucky soil. So that's one of the things you have to know about. You got to go with someone who's done this before, experienced. You don't just get out there and jump out of your boat and start walking and expect, you're going to just walk up on some redfish. It doesn't work that way. We like to get out there with our binoculars, span the horizon, look for the tails first, get in position, figure out which direction the redfish is moving, and try to go out there and pretty much ambush them.
Half hunting, half fishing, isn't it?
It is, and it is so fun, Rick. It's one of my favorite times of the year in Northeast Florida, and it's why I really love living in Northeast Florida. And this is a great time for beginner fly fishermen. I can't tell you how many people this time of year that I have put on their first redfish on a fly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that difficult. I'm not patting myself on the back saying, hey, I've done some great things. It's an easy time to get these reds on a fly. A lot of times it's very difficult to catch a redfish on a fly, but this time of year when they're up there feeding on those crabs, you throw a crab pattern weedless fly up there and you get it in front of that guy and you just have to move it a little bit and he's going to pounce on it.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. David, we can't thank you enough. I hope your red fishing remains strong. Keep in mind, we've got 1 month to flounder fish now, so if the guys are going to catch flounder, they got to do it within the next month. And
I want to talk about that next week too, Rick, because, a lot of people, they're catching a lot of flounder. They haven't seen those big ones yet, but it's still, I think we're going to start seeing those big ones here real soon.
I agree. Thank you, Cap. We'll talk with you next week.
All right, Rick, take the line.
You too, Captain David Voorhees. Our thanks to Captain David Voorhees for a great Northeast Florida report. Now we're going to pull it down to East Central. I'm going to go out on a limit and say the mullet have arrived there in the surf. Am I right, Jimmy?
There are a few, and that's a good thing. We've got some sharks, some tarpon, king mackerel are in there again. Just like we had last week as they were to show up. It's a continuation, and hopefully it's a continuation for the next 3 to 4 weeks as we, enjoy this decent mullet run that we have going on right now.
Hey, it's still good up here, Jimmy. I tell you, the boys I talked to today said you could walk on them with no problem. They were just so jammed in, so thick, and they're headed your way.
Well, good deal. The snook, redfish, tarpon, sharks have all been, good along the jetties as well. So the guys that are getting out on the piers are able to catch them. So if you don't have a boat, it doesn't really matter. You can still get out there and catch some really nice fish right now. Make sure that, especially with the sharks showing up, you can tackle up a little bit. You can get a little heavier main line. You can get a little heavier leader out there, and if they do show up, obviously having a little bit of wire is going to keep those fish on the line a little bit.
That's fantastic. What's going on inshore? Anything important?
Well, inshore, Rick, I tell you, it's been really good. The redfish and trout bite has been pretty solid. We've had very few redfish really to speak of throughout the Indian and Banana River lagoons, and even into the Mosquito Lagoon. But with all of these rains, it's flushing out all of these back marshes and little bays and creeks, and everything's starting to flow. It's good in a way, it's bad in a way. It's going to start bringing all that fertilizer into the lagoon system that everybody seems to put on their yards for whatever reason, I guess because they like poisoning the lagoon. But it's also creating flowways, and those flowways are, attracting snook, redfish, trout. They're all getting in those flows and eating the mullet that are kind of congregating and the glass minnows that are congregating there. The other thing that it's doing is it's pushing the saltwater line off of the shoreline a little bit. So the main body of trout that was pushed super tight to the banks is now backing off and getting out in those 2 and 3 foot drop off areas where the salinity is still a little higher, as opposed to being up really, really shallow like they've been all summer long.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I tell you what, it sounds to me like things have finally picked up down there for you. I know for quite a while it was a hot summer, and it really doesn't. There's other factors at play, Jim. I don't think it's necessarily always a cooling down that triggers a lot of this stuff. I think the fish are dialed into the days getting shorter. I think there's more to it than just cold water.
there's a sense of urgency. They know winter's coming and they need to get fattened up for it. So they're much more aggressive. And so, in fact, in some cases, I'd almost call them reckless.
And you know who else feels it is the fishermen. You tell me once that cold front, we got a cold front coming through this weekend. You tell me once it chills down a little bit, your phone won't start ringing off the hook.
It's been a pretty solid summer, but let's just keep it going right into the fall and winter, Rick. I'm ready for it.
I think you're going to. Thank you, Jimmy, as always.
Take care.
Talk with you next week. Jim Ross. Our thanks to Jim Ross for a great East Central report. Now, we're going to pull into what was called the sailfish capital of the world before we started really traveling. Still a great place to catch them. My favorite fishing village, Stuart, Florida. John, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here, Rick.
Good to hear from you, Captain Earhart. Tell me what's happening on the fishing front.
Fishing offshore has been pretty consistent. We've still been catching a few sailfish. You know, we're not getting the numbers like you'd expect in the summer, but, you know, if you're trolling most of the day, you can expect to catch 1 to 3 fish. You know, you might catch as many as 5. You know, and most of that's been in like 50 to 150 feet of water. But it seems like we really have had an influx of mahi, and big ones too. So I've seen some mahi this week weighed up to 41 pounds. So,
Wow.
I mean, there's some monsters around right now, and we're catching those on thread fins and live mullet. So I mean, if you got a live well, load it up with mullet or thread fins and start chumming when you get out there on a weed line, because you very well might find yourself hooked up to a 40-pound mahi right now. You know, and they're catching those 150 feet all the way out to about 1,500 feet. Really just depends on where there's a nice condition. You know, you find some debris, chances are you're going to catch some mahi in Stewart right now.
That's real good. That's real good. You hear anything from inshore?
Yeah, inshore fishing's really picked up this week. We got the mullet run. Seems like it's in full effect, both in the river and along the beach. A lot of tarpon, a lot of snook, giant jacks. We've had some nice redfish too, even. But it's been consistently snook and tarpon right now, with a lot of jack crevalles mixed in when you're fishing around docks and seawalls and such. So definitely want to have your heavier braid and your heavier leader with your larger hooks this time of year, because these fish are full grown.
John, I've always said that what people don't realize, if you're not a fisherman, if you just love wildlife, it is worth being on the beach at daylight this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worth the price of admission just to see those mullet jumping out of the water and watching those big tarpon chasing them around.
I just think it's so cool. I love it every time I do it. I went to a little inlet that we've got here that I thought was too shallow. I went in there with a fly rod to catch jack crevalle at first light, and I got in there before daylight, and the tarpon literally ran me out of the water, John. There were so many of them, and when one of them ran into my leg, I said, that's it. I'm out of here. I climbed back up on the beach and cast from there. It's a gorgeous sight to behold, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I love the mullet run. I mean, maybe last year or the year before, believe it or not, I was out in about 75 feet of water, Rick, and there was this giant school of, like, I'd say 10-inch mullet, and they were just doing a circle out there. And as I got closer, the mahi were corralling them up. And I took a lure and I cast it right by that school of mullet, and it was instant fish on.
How about that?
Anytime I see a school of mullet, I know there's going to be some big predators around.
Yeah, I like that, especially if they're in a circle. They're balling up to try and be – everybody wants to be the mullet in the middle. Don't leave me out here on the outside. Thank you, Captain John, as always.
Yep, I'll talk to you next week.
Look forward to it. Take care. Captain John Earhart from the Chaos and the Mayhem in Stewart. Now, time to check in with the mayor of South Beach, Captain Alan Sherman. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, Rick. How are you?
Good. Tell me what's going on with your fishing.
So our fishing's picking up, which I know you're happy to hear. It's still really hot here, though. We're still having 90-degree temperatures every day, and the waters are really warm, and they're going to continue to be like that until we get a couple of good cold fronts come through here and start lowering the water temperatures. But we've seen our first parts of the fall migration. We had finger mullet in the bay earlier in the week. I'm pretty sure those bait fish did not stick because the water's so warm. I'm sure they kept on moving. And then there's been quite a few more bait fish schools of pilchards and Spanish sardines and threadfin herring. Some bigger baits have showed up, and a lot of those schools have stuck around. Not a lot of fish feeding on them, though, in the bays anyway. And that's where I've been fishing. I haven't been on the offshore side, but I've got a few offshore reports, to back up some of the fishing that we have going on. I talked to Jimbo Thomas this morning, and that's on the Thomas Flyer at a Bayside, and he told me the dolphin fishing was spotty all week. Now, I know last week you heard of some really good reports coming out of North Fort Lauderdale, and I wasn't aware of a lot of sargasso weeds that had pushed through our area that part of the week. And for a few more days after that, they had big patches of weeds as well. But, in the Gulf Stream, everything moves north, and so did that. And now the fish that they're catching are scattered and they're under floating debris. So if you can find some floating debris, everybody this past week who's found some kind of significant floating debris has caught fish under them. And then there's been wahoo underneath that floating debris as well. Mm-hmm. So there are dolphin out there. One of my friends went out 2,400 feet of water to catch 2 dolphins.
Woo! Woo!
So
they better have been big ones.
They weren't. They were 7 to 10 pounders, and it just goes to show you. I mean, that's how far he traveled to try and find something.
Yeah.
And then the next guy in 600 feet of water finds a board and catches 20 fish. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you're looking for dolphin, you just got to go out there. The old saying is, if you don't go, you won't know.
And dolphin, maybe more so than anything else we fish for, Alan, you might as well just stay on the run until you see something. Now,
well, that's the way I do it.
I'm a big believer in fishing somewhere all the time, which sounds stupid,
right.
But it was some great advice given to me years ago by a dear friend. And what he was trying to tell me was find something to fish on. Blue water looks pretty to you. Fish don't care about it. Fish are looking for something to feed on. And you're right. When it comes to dolphin fishing, just keep running until that board or that weed line or whatever shows up to help.
Or the birds. You find those birds
also. Yep. You're right. Anything going on inshore, Alan?
So they're getting kingfish and bonitas, barracudas on just outside of the reef. The guys drifting baits and trolling baits. They're catching. We've had a lot of kingfish in our area, which we don't usually see in the summer. Especially fish that are 7 to 15 pounds, but there's been not a ton of them, but there's been enough of them to actually target them. So, there's been kingfish just off the reef and bonitas and barracudas. Wahoo fishing on the full moon was not so much, although today is the full moon. So I haven't really heard of any reports as far as that goes. Bone fishing permits, still catching them on the shallow flats of South Biscayne Bay, and there's been a few tarpon and a few permits at the Bear Cut Bridge in Key Biscayne. I was in Flamingo Saturday, and we had multiple backcountry slams, snook, redfish, and trout. And then we also had a grand slam because we during the day we had 3 tarpon, close to 30 snook, a Goliath grouper, a sea trout or 2, and a nice redfish.
That's a sweet day. That's a sweet day.
No, and it was a short day. It was a 6-hour trip.
That's a sweet
trip. The guys
trip
were
now.
ecstatic. Yes.
Yep.
So there's some good fishing to be had.
Good deal. Good deal. All right, Alan, as always, we appreciate it so much. We look forward to talking with you next week, if that's okay.
I look forward to it myself.
Thanks, Alan. Captain Alan Sherman from Miami Beach. All right, we're going to head across the state a little bit to the 10,000 Islands area. But before we do that, how about a word from D.O.A.? Whew, yes, sir, it is still hot. And, of course, that means the water's hot. And just like the great fish always do, the biggest and the baddest of so many species we fish for are holding in deep water in an attempt to stay cool. Well, you name it. If it heads deep in the water column, it can't refuse a D.O.A. terrorize. It dives straight down, crawls across the bottom with an action that no deep feeder can resist. Whether it's a crappie deep under some lily pads or a tarpon rooting around the bridge pilings, D.O.A. makes the size and color terrorize that they just can't say no to. Flashing that big bright eye in front of any bottom-fitting game fish is just unfair. You know, maybe that's why they call D.O.A. lures the unfair advantage. Now, let's hop across the state and check in the 10,000 island areas with one Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm doing fine. It's storming here, but other than that, I'm doing good. Steve, we're starting to see a lot of bait on the East Coast. Anything showing up over there?
Yeah, we've been having quite a bit of bait. We don't get the true East Coast bait run in earnest, if you will, over in your guys' neck of the woods all the way to Miami. But our bait's been pretty plentiful, and we definitely get a little bit of a fall bait run, which is probably going to come early because everything seems to be early this year. And our bait is, despite the really, really warm water temperatures, the bait's actually of good size and it's plentiful right now. So it's kind of fueling everything near shore and inshore. So it's been pretty good.
That's excellent. Hey, Steve, I sent you a question earlier today, and I really want your thoughts. I gave you the top 5 innovations that we've had in the tackle business in the last 30, 40 years. You have to do away with either improved bait casting and spinning reels, they're incredible drags and our ability to throw them a mile, braided line, fluorocarbon, super sharp hooks. What are you going to give up on?
Amazingly, and you probably won't get this answer, but I have a lot of spinning in my area, and if I absolutely had to give up one of those, I'd probably give up fluorocarbon.
Yep. Fluorocarbon's been the number one answer. Yeah.
Has it? Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought it might be a little bit more popular, but I got dark water. I've got tea-colored water in my area for the most part in the back country, and even our nearshore waters, have a bit of a tint to it. So I can kind of get away with not using fluoro. I definitely love the the abrasion resistance on it, but boy, that's a tough list to pick from. So I would definitely have to go with fluorocarbon.
Interesting. Yeah, nobody picked braid, I can tell you that much.
Oh, yeah, heartbeat. That's definitely not ever leaving.
I can tell you as a blue water fisherman, to me, the incredible beauty of braid has been able to use 100 yards of mono and then 500 or 600 yards of braid on these little bitty reels that are so much lighter and more fun to fish with.
Isn't it something how the size of offshore reels have come down?
Oh, it's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
I'm surprised I don't own stock in Shimano 80 wides because nobody's buying them anymore, and that's usually what happens when I own stock in something.
That's so true. So true.
Cap, as always, we appreciate it. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Oh, can't wait, Rick.
Thanks, Steve. Captain Steve Dahl from the 10,000 Islands. Before we move up into Southwest Florida, let's have a word from Shimano. Funk and Wagnalls defines symmetry as similar parts combined in perfect balance. Shimano and Strike Zone defines symmetry as the perfect spinning combo for whatever your target is. You can't beat the balance and performance of the Shimano Symmetry spinners for freshwater or inshore saltwater fishing. Outfits like Symmetry are the reason for shopping at Strike Zone. Not only are the Shimano Symmetry spinners the perfect balance between rod and reel, they're also on sale at Strike Zone for $99. One of the biggest mistakes most anglers make is fishing outfits that are out of balance. If you try to balance your own Shimano outfit, you can almost never get the best out of your cast inshore or put maximum pressure on a sea monster offshore. The symmetry between Strike Zone and Shimano, the perfect balance for all your fishing needs. Now we're going to jump up to West Central Florida and find out what's happening with Captain Ray Markham. Raymond, how are you?
Captain Ricky, everybody's seeing red up here, bud.
Oh, yeah? You catching some redfish, are you?
There's a lot of redfish going on up here, and And I'm hearing it from so many people that they just have no idea where all these fish all of a sudden came from.
Good.
And honestly, I think a lot of them are bigger fish, so I think they're probably that brood stock that's been out in the Gulf.
When you say bigger fish, you're talking about over slots or upper slots?
Yeah, a lot of them are over slot.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. And, the action's been really crazy at times, but just like everything else is going on, when these fish are in big schools spawning, they usually don't eat. So, guys that are getting out in the Gulf and thinking they found the mother lode, unless they got a big purse seine or something, they aren't going to get too many fish unless they're snagging them.
That's really funny because we used to see that on the East Coast. We would see 25, 30-pound fish on top of the water, 10, 15 miles offshore, half an acre, and all we had to do to those fish was get close to them. They would eat anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think timing is everything, and we're on the full moon, so and that's another thing that I think is playing a big part of this. Whenever you're on a moon like that, typically it's one of the factors that make these fish spawn. So if you're right on it, they're probably not going to eat. But if you're one side or the other, they either get ready or they already been, and so they're going to be hungry. So tomorrow should be killer.
That makes sense to me. That certainly makes sense to me. Anything going on there besides redfish?
Well, it's funny you mention. Snook fishing's been really good on the inside. Now, I say on the inside, you're looking at backcountry areas, creek mouths, mouths of the rivers, things like that. Fish, I think we're going to have a winter this year. The last few years, I can't really say that. It's been way, way, way too warm. But I really do think we're going to have some really crazy winter weather this year. And it's funny that I'm looking at what these fish are doing, and it seems to me like they're getting ready for something that unless you got the old farmer's almanac out, that we're not really ready for. So, I'm thinking we're going to have a winter this year, and I think it's going to absolutely make the fishing better. So, and speaking of better fishing,
before you go there, it's funny you say that, Ray, because I just thought of something. I've got 2 big black labs. I have gone from vacuuming my house every single day to doing it once a week. They are not losing their hair all of a sudden. What does that tell you?
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Uh-huh. Well, we're talking about things getting better. I'm not sure if this is really a better thing, but, we don't want to talk about how things have changed in the last maybe 30, 40 years or so. There's been a lot of innovations that have made our fishing more productive. I can't say it's really better. I mean, I remember, back in the 80s, old Loran Sea was going on, and, you were getting pretty close to where you wanted to find a fishing hole again. But then GPS came along, and that made it a little better. Now the guys fishing inshore, they got side-scanning sonar, which not only do you have to be, right next to them, I mean, it will shoot out the side and tell you how far away the fish is.
Yeah.
And if that's not enough, you got guys that are now fishing with drones. I mean, they're not necessarily fishing, but they're scouting with drones, which personally I feel like that's not a good thing. Not at all. But another thing that a lot of guys are using now, even more than scouting, they're using Google Earth. They're getting on the internet and they're looking at Google Earth, and the detail is so good on a lot of these things. You can scout out holes that you would never even get to, if you didn't know they were there. So it's like narrowing down the charts instead of looking at a chart that doesn't really tell you anything other than, maybe where a sandbar used to be because charts aren't updated frequently.
Right.
That kind of thing. And it will tell you a whole lot more than just about anything else. So, those innovations like that are hard to come by. And if somebody sits down and studies them, I think that'll make them a better fisherman by far. But I'm just concerned that we're getting too good for our own good.
We are getting awfully good. I don't disagree with that at all, and that's why we have to be very vigilant into how many fish we take and how many fish.
Well, that's why we have rules and regulations, that's why we got guys that are studying this in biology. So,
and as much as we squawk about them, we got to have them because, quite honestly, we're not smart enough to manage ourselves. So we have to have somebody say, "No, Rick, you don't need to take 6 cobia home. 2 will be fine."
Some of us are like that, some of us are just absolute hogs, and it's like you already got your limit in the boat, and then you just pull in one that's a little bigger, and you're tempted.
Don't go there.
That's not me.
Yeah, nope.
That's not me. I got my fish for dinner and I'm happy.
I'm with you, Cap. Ray, that's a great report. I like your thoughts on innovation, and if it's all right with you, we'll talk with you next week.
I hope so.
Thanks, Cap. Ray. We appreciate it.
We'll talk to you then.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamaha marine engine oils. What? Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamaha full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamaha marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to you second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat Facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Let's head up the road a little bit. I know exactly where I want to go when I want to kick back and relax, and I know who I want to relax with, my brother William Toney up the Mayor in Homosassa. Mr. Mayor, how are you?
Doing good, riding out the rain. It's just pretty much everyday occurrence here. In fact, we're only 3 inches from breaking the all-time record in Citrus County that was set in 1882.
I predict you're going to make it.
I think so. I mean, we know it is another squall like this is another 2 inches, but the good thing about it is the fishing is good as it should be in September, inshore and offshore.
Oh, good. Good. What's biting?
Well, right now, I can tell you what, if you're into trout, it's game on. Anywhere from 3 to 5 foot of water, using a popping cork with a D.O.A. glow and a chartreuse head cow shad. Also been getting them on the mirror lure, watermelon red flake, fishing that 3 to 5 foot range. Look for broken bottom. I call it yellow bottom, but it's actually live bottom with sponges. Uh-huh. That's where your bigger trout are. And if you catch 2 or 3 in a row, mark it and stay right there with them. We got snooker biting really good. Red fishing is pretty much off the chain right now, and even getting some triple tail thrown on top of that.
Legal triple tail?
Legal. You have to sort through a bunch, but, getting that 18-incher has been a little tougher. But, it's pretty what I do when I see them on a mark or somewhere where I'm seeing them. There's always going to be a bunch of juvies, and the big one's going to be right there in them. So what I do, it's a bait and switch. I'll take a live shrimp and have the angler ready with the live shrimp and just take a popping cork and throw right over there against the buoy and start popping it back in. The little ones will chase it right away. The big ones will stay behind and have the angler target that fish. That way you don't have to gut hook or
catch those small fish, and that's what I've been doing.
Ah, I see. That makes perfect sense. Setting them up is what you're doing. I got it.
Yep.
All right. Have you heard anything from offshore at all, William?
Offshore has been really good. The gag grouper bite has been great, starting anywhere as shallow as 8 foot.
Ooh.
And a lot of guys are getting them on casting plugs right now. But the key to getting the fish on there, we got a lot of floating grass right now, is wait till that high outgoing tide to pull that grass further offshore, and then you'll have a lot better luck on the plugs without the grass hanging you up. And even sitting on the stern of the boat and dragging them 80 to 100 foot behind the boat while the anglers are holding a rod, running probably about 3 to 4 knots, real slow like that, with either a Rapala F14. The hot colors have been Fire Tiger, mackerel, and the mullet, and just sitting there and just trolling those rocks. If you've got 4 or 5 rocks in a row in a line, you're guaranteed to hook up on some grouper, and if not, get broke off.
Golly, I tell you what, that's fantastic. The only thing they could do to me over here on this coast to make grouper more fun is to bring them up shallow, and you guys get them over there shallow. That's outstanding. Can you get a limit in a day now, William?
You can, and the secret of getting a limit is just hitting a lot of good spots and moving. And what I suggest, it's 2 per angler. Of course, if you're a captain in state waters, you can fish them legally without a reef permit. But if you go anywhere outside that 9-mile limit with a captain, they got to have that federal reef permit, or you're in big trouble. Now, if you're an angler going out there to target it, I would suggest if they're not hitting on the plugs, but you feel they're there, a live pinfish over the top of rock free lining, maybe take a couple of them and injure them a little bit, throw them out there, kind of get them fired up. Some of the grouper that we've been catching have been while we're snapper fishing, and once the snapper bite gets real heavy, 9 times out of 10, we're going to get, just railed on a light rod snapper fishing, and it's good to have that heavy spinning rod, and you could even use about a 3/8 ounce jig head with a shrimp on it to get that grouper bite while you're snapper fishing.
Perfect. William's a great report. I appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yep, I'll be right down here in Slogfest, Old Homosassa.
We'll talk soon, my brother. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
All right, thanks to William Toney. He's always got everything under control there in Homosassa. Let's move out into the Northwest a little bit and talk in with our main man, Kevin Lanier. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Captain Rick, we're doing just fine. But I do have to start off tonight and say, William may have all his act together all the time.
He talks
I really
like
need to figure out how he does that.
Yeah. He's got it going on over at Homosassa. But you got to realize, when you live in a town with 6 people, you're going to be in the top 10 every year.
That's true. Very true statement.
Kevin, tell me about fishing out in your area.
Well, this past weekend we had a tournament over in Panama City, and offshore tournament, and they caught quite a number of mahi and actually some big ones. This time of year is the time we see the bulls and the cows run through the Gulf, and a few wahoo. Some nice ones, no record breakers, but, 30, 40 pounders.
Good fish.
And so good fish. And, since the Fish and Wildlife folks have done their thing again and shut down red grouper and triggers, and it's getting kind of thin as to what we can keep around here now. So some of the offshore stuff is slowing down unless the guys are going way offshore for a big trip. In close, redfish. We've got a herd of redfish swimming around the bay in the Cape Sandblast. If you can find them, you can absolutely load your boat, and you can get all the redfish you want to catch and release all day. There's flounder around, so there's good fishing opportunities in the area, and it sounds to me like we're going to get our first cold through this week, so it's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's supposed to get downright chilly here this weekend, and I'm ready for that. I'm ready for the mullet run, which is going on, by the way, but the fish get real serious after the first cold front, and I'll be ready to head up to Georgia to hunt here real soon. So lots of good stuff on the horizon. That's an outstanding report, Kevin. We appreciate it ever so much. Now, what will be your next opening? What comes into effect for you next?
Well, to be real honest with you, Captain Rick, we kind of glide into relaxing and enjoying the winter. My deckhand is a big duck hunter, so he actually does guided duck hunting trips. So he'll pick up on that. And my wife and I, we're doing a tournament that runs through October here. It's called Running of the Bulls. And we'll do some red fishing. But usually about the 1st of November, we start to build that fire and kick those feet up and go, it's time to relax for a little bit.
I like it. Thank you, Kevin. We'll look forward to talking. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say 30 years as an air traffic controller and retiring and fishing, it's kind of every once in a while we'll take a month or two off and enjoy some relaxation.
Well, one of us here on this phone might have slept until 9:30 this morning. I don't know who, but I worked all weekend this weekend getting the deer area ready and getting my blinds set up, my food plots and all, and I was whipped this morning. I appreciate it, Cap.
All right, we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Kevin. Captain Kevin Lanier from KC Sport Fishing Adventures. You know what that means? It's time to cut out the panhandle and call it a wrap. Let's check in with Tyler Massey. How we doing, Tyler?
We're doing great over this way, Rick.
Good deal. Tell me what's going on with the fishing.
So fishing's been really good. Our inshore fishing, we're kind of getting, we always talk about our summer patterns versus, fall and stuff. Well, we're getting out of our summer pattern where it's a little more difficult to catch the fish. We're moving into that fall where the redfish are really showing up in good numbers. So redfish we're catching them all around our pass. There's rock jetties in our pass. They're small, but we're catching some redfish around there. There's structures around Fort Pickens, which is by our pass too, and there's redfish on those as well. Just fishing with some sort of live bait, a shrimp or a scaled sardine or a pinfish or bull minnow, just any kind of live bait fishing on the bottom of the Carolina rig. So inshore guys have been doing really well fishing for those redfish. You're going to catch some mangrove snappers and maybe some flounder mixed in as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Sounds like redfish have been pretty good just about everywhere. What have you heard from offshore? Anything?
So offshore, we did a trip last few days. We actually went white marlin fishing, and we've been talking about, white marlin fishing. It's been really good. The last week I got invited to go with a friend of mine on a sport fish boat. We went 7 for 13 on white marlin in 2 days.
Woo!
So that was a fun trip, and that was like we talked about before. We were teaser fishing, where you're just pulling 2 spreader rig squid chains, fishing a couple of naked ballyhoos out there right there by them, and pitch baiting the fish whenever they come up into the teaser.
No dredges, just the teasers.
Yeah, just two spreader barred squid chains.
I got you.
And we had four baits out, two longs, 2 flats, and just worked the fish whenever if they got into the spread or our teaser, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Good fight.
You say you were 7 for 10?
7 for 13. So we had 13
for
shots and caught 7 of them.
Let me tell you what, on white marlin, anytime you're above 50%, you're out of my league. I am the world's worst white marlin fisherman.
Yeah, they're definitely. We were the other way around for a while. We got our stuff together and started catching them, but they're one of the hardest fish to hook and keep hooked.
Sure are.
As far as billfish goes, I mean, I don't know if it's just because they bite so soft or what, but they'll pick it up and drop it 3 or 4 times before you get a hook in them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it doesn't work out in your favor.
That's for sure. Oh man, that makes me want to come over there and go white marlin fishing something fierce. I tell you what.
Fishing. We're fishing we caught the fish between 600 foot and 1,200 feet. And it's south of Pensacola. It's it's a ditch that runs kind of going towards the oil rigs, but not quite that far.
Now let me ask you, was that 2 days? I mean, did you come in between, or did you stay out offshore overnight?
No, we stayed out offshore overnight.
Gotcha. Okay, and how far offshore were you?
Well, we were about 70 miles south of Pensacola.
Gotcha. Okay, that's outstanding. Tyler, as always, we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yep, I'll be here. We'll see you guys.
Captain Tyler Massey wrapping up what has been a busy Florida Sportsman Action Spotter tonight, and lots of guys in a good mood. Oh, my goodness, things are starting to change. The Mullet Run is in full force, coming all the way down the East Coast now. Captain John Earhart validated that they're down in Stewart and pushing south. A few showing up in Miami, and a lot of good fishing because of it. Redfish are good everywhere. The whole state reported excellent red fishing tonight. That speaks to our population of our redfish. I think the biggest surprise I had out of tonight's reports were a very strong big mahi bite out of Stewart. That's kind of a weird deal for them to be there then. Now, that's got nothing to do with the mullet run. I don't think they oftentimes come in that close to feed on mullet, but maybe so. Sailfish were fair. You get on further down, and there's lots of action going on inshore. I know Alan Sherman reported great fishing from back in the backcountry in the areas where he fished. Get over on the West Coast, the hunt for Red October is on. The redfish are going crazy. The snook are biting awfully well. Things are just really good. Now, you get up to Ray Markham's area. He said there's no more sign of the red tide. The redfish have also led the way of feeding fish up there. How about Tyler Massey and going out that way in the white marlin bite? He was 7 for 13 in 2 days. That is really good white marlin fishing. It appears to me, since we got rid of long lines for the most part and have just about mandated circle hooks into all bill fishing, that our white marlin numbers are getting better, and I'm certainly glad to hear that. I'll take good news on our fisheries any way we can get them. Well, the verdict is in. If you had to give up one thing between fluorocarbon, between smaller, sharper hooks, between better bait casting reels, between better spinning reels, and between braided lines, all the guys said if they had to give up one, it would be fluorocarbon. That was the number one winner, as everything else is deemed essential. Well, I know I've had a good time tonight. I sure hope you have too. Until next week, for Florida Sportsman Magazine, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we'll see you out on the rip.